Hi, I'm Bill Whittle from PJTV, and we're here in Washington to continue our discussion with our counterterrorism expert who's requested anonymity. And in this segment, we want to discuss how the election of Barack Obama has affected morale throughout the entire intelligence gathering community. Let me ask you a question about the effect that this willful blindness has on morale. You've spent many, many years in the FBI, and I've spoken to several other intelligence analysts who have said that the political weather has changed so much with this new administration that I've spoken to intelligence professionals who've said that they actually fear the current Attorney General more than they fear the people that they're trying to defeat. So what effect does this have on you and other lifelong intelligence and counterterrorism agents?
My experience is there are several pieces to this, but the first is there is a gross ignorance, even at the street level in the FBI and DHS, to what we're talking about. First, because there is no training and education program in the counterintelligence community, U.S. government-wide, that discusses the Muslim Brotherhood, who they are, what their objectives are, what their MOs are, what their how they're actually operating on the street, and specifically that their primary objective is not violent jihad. It's information warfare. It's influence operations. It's to walk into an office wearing a very nice suit and an incredibly warm demeanor and nuzzling up to the leadership in DHS, FBI, State Department, and creating what, in the counterintelligence community is a targeted information campaign or an influence operation to get that leader to defer to that individual. In this case, that individual is an enemy of the United States. For instance, the Fort Hood. It's very important because you have to think of it in terms of influence operations and propaganda. The first thing these groups will do, and these are known hostile groups in the United States, is they will minimize the event and they will attempt to absolutely soften the response by the U.S. government, which is how they are able to put us on our heels and keep us from aggressively going after these people.
Well, let's talk about aggressively going after these people. One of the things that we were told as a nation with the election of the current president was that this previous idea of us being in a sort of a worldwide war against Islamic jihad was fundamentally flawed, and that essentially that kind of worldview created more problems. Can you tell us what the level of background activity has been since the election of Barack Obama? They claimed that electing President Obama would reduce the number of attacks on the country. Is that what we're seeing?
No, since January of last year, 2009, there have been a significant increase in obviously actual attacks here in the United States, attempted attacks, thwarted attacks, and certainly a surge of activity, especially after, say, February of 2009.
Why?
They are concluding that we are being weak and showing weakness, both domestically and overseas, and certainly our activity overseas and here is indicative of that, and therefore you will naturally always see then a spike of their activity if they think we're in a position of weakness and they're in a position of strength.
So the deterrent effect appears to have weakened. Are there any other considerations that might explain this increase in terrorist attempts that we appear to be seeing?
Sure. Certainly there is still a continued problem with awareness of what the threat is, who the enemy is, in the domestic law enforcement intelligence units, as well as overseas with the agency. We still have not identified an enemy. It's now 2010. If you can't identify an enemy, you can't defeat him. The only people that the U.S. government reaches out to in the Muslim community, as a matter of fact, are members of the Muslim Brotherhood, whose stated objective is to wage a civilization jihad against the United States in order to destroy America from within. And when in the war on terror, the only people we look to advise us are Muslim brothers, many of them Hamas, that creates a situation where obviously at the leadership level, our planning, our decision making, and our ability to go after an enemy when the enemy is advising us of how to prosecute this war, that just creates a situation where it's absurd.
Well, I want to get back to this morale issue because, as I mentioned, I've heard from many other intelligence analysts who are taking early retirement and they're taking lifetimes of experience and expertise with them just right out the door. So just speaking personally now, how does this politically correct response in the face of mortal danger affect men and women like yourself?
I can say that I know that certainly in the last 8 months, as I mentioned, with the increase of attacks and thwarted, that many of which have been thwarted, obviously not all, the people who understand the nature of the threat and who understand who the Muslim Brotherhood is, and then watch an attack, and then watch Hamas officials, for instance, from CARE and the Muslim Public Affairs Council, on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, major networks, it is incredibly demoralizing for the people who actually understand the threat. And again, that is not the majority of people in the FBI or in DHS, because the very people advising the leadership tell them that, a particular type of training or the actual truth of the matter is not the truth. But as long as they continue to deal with Muslim Brotherhood people, the majority of people in the FBI and DHS will never get to the truth unless the people that do normally do it because they're doing their own self-study on their own time. The fact that in 2010 there is not mandatory counterterrorism training in the FBI for counterterrorism agents and analysts that discusses in detail the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamic doctrine that supports what they're doing seems to be quite outrageous.
Well, I have a final question for you regarding your experience with the FBI. Every now and then, we hear stories about these remote Muslim training camps that are providing firearms and paramilitary training. And every now and then, you see a video of masked men kind of marching through the forest, like American forests, carrying AK-47s, they're jumping over logs, and they're firing downrange and using cover to advance and all that stuff. And most Americans kind of reluctantly think that, well, that's their First Amendment right, or it's their Second Amendment right, or whatever. However, some of us look at this and we know exactly what's going on here. Some of us with imaginations can imagine a day when these terror cells are activated and they march down out of the forest and they go to the shopping malls or elementary schools and start shooting for real. Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, it's not a possibility. It's what they're doing. Information developed from informants, as well as wiretaps and other techniques, that these groups are here in the United States to be the focal point when the jihad here kicks off in a grander scale. They've been captured on conversations saying that. We have informant information. We have witness testimony. So when they are doing this training, firearms training, killing and kidnapping technique training, and all the various techniques that they're doing, as well as hand-to-hand combat, in furtherance of preparing for jihad against the United States, that is a violation of federal law to conspire to overthrow and wage war against the United States.
How is the political leadership of this country going to explain to the American people that if this day ever comes, God forbid it ever comes, but if this day ever comes, when thousands and thousands and thousands of heavily armed killers come down out of these camps that we've known about for 20 years and start shooting up malls and schools and everything else, how in God's name are they going to explain this to the American people?
I have no idea. I can't imagine.